Captain Zexai stood before the massive holographic display that filled the command center of the Crithani flagship. The blue light from the projection painted his chitinous face in cold shadows as images of dead worlds rotated slowly before him. Each planet told the same story. Each civilization had followed the same path to destruction. The first image showed Veltara Prime, once home to the crystalline Veltar race. Their cities had been made of living light, beautiful spires that reached toward the stars. They had fought the hegemony with weapons that could bend light itself into cutting beams. Their ships had been invisible until they attacked. For 2 years, they had held the Crithani forces back with their clever tricks and advanced technology. But tricks could not stop the hunger of the hegemony forever. The biomechanical ships had adapted. They had learned to see through the Veltar invisibility. They had found ways to block the light weapons. When the end came, it came quickly. The Veltar had sent their greatest fleet to make one last stand. 3,000 ships of pure energy had faced the hegemony Armada. None had returned home. Zexai waved his hand and the display changed. Now it showed the Osiri homeworld, or what was left of it. The Osari had been different from other races. They shared one mind across billions of bodies. Their planets had been covered with massive colonies that worked as single organisms. When the hegemony arrived, the Osari had tried something new. They had linked their minds across dozens of worlds, creating a superintelligence that could think faster than any computer. The hive mind had been clever. It had predicted Crithani moves before they were made. It had built ships that could repair themselves and weapons that learned from each battle. For 5 years, the war had been fought across 100 star systems. The hegemony had lost more ships fighting the Osari than any enemy before them, but the Crithani had been patient. They had found the weakness in the hive mind. They had discovered that if they could cut the connections between worlds, the superintelligence would break apart. Special ships had been built to block the mental links. One by one, the Osari worlds had gone silent. When the last connection was severed, the resistance had crumbled in days. The display shifted again. This time it showed the ruins of Zenith Station, the greatest achievement of the Zenith Federation. These people had been the most advanced race the hegemony had ever encountered. Their technology had seemed like magic. They could fold space to travel instantly between stars. They could create matter from pure energy. They could even manipulate time itself in small ways. The Federation had been confident when the hegemony first arrived. They had weapons that could destroy stars and defenses that existed in multiple dimensions. Their greatest ships were the size of moons and carried reality-warping engines that could change the laws of physics in local space. When war began, they had been certain that their superior technology would win. They had been wrong. The Crithani had done what they always did. They had studied. They had learned. They had adapted. The biomechanical ships had evolved to resist the reality-warping effects. They had developed new weapons that could follow the Federation ships through folded space. Most importantly, they had discovered that the Zenith technology required enormous amounts of energy. All they had to do was wait and keep fighting. Eventually, the Federation had run out of power. Zexai had been young when the Zenith War ended. He remembered watching their final fleet make its desperate attack on the hegemony core worlds. 200 reality-warping dreadnoughts had appeared in the home system, ready to end the war in one decisive battle. They had been met by 10,000 Crithani vessels. The battle had lasted 3 days. When it was over, the Federation was history. The captain touched a control and dozens more images appeared. The Thermal Collective had tried to hide in the hearts of stars. The quantum monks had attempted to scatter across infinite parallel dimensions. The Machine Imperium had uploaded their minds into vast computer networks that spanned galaxies. All had fallen. All had followed the same pattern. First came the discovery. Crithani scouts would find a new species and study them from a distance. Then came the contact. A small fleet would arrive with an ultimatum: submit or be destroyed. The new species would always choose to fight. They would gather their allies. They would prepare their defenses. They would send their greatest fleets to meet the hegemony in battle, and they would lose. They always lost, because the Crithani had 3,000 years of experience. They had fought every type of enemy. They had seen every weapon. They had defeated every strategy. No matter how advanced or clever or numerous their opponents were, the pattern never changed. Zexai smiled as he thought about the pattern. It was beautiful in its simplicity. Fear made species predictable. When faced with destruction, they always did the same things. They always made the same mistakes. They trusted in their weapons or their numbers or their intelligence. They never understood that the hegemony had faced all of these things before. The door to the command center opened with a soft hiss. Subcommander Lekhai entered and approached the captain's platform. The younger officer's movements were quick and nervous. He carried a datapad in his lower arms while his upper arms gestured with barely controlled excitement. "Captain," Lekhai said, his voice high with anticipation, "the scout reports have arrived from the rim sectors. We have found them." Zexhai did not turn from the display. "Found what, Subcommander?" "The humans, sir. The new species we detected 3 cycles ago. Our scouts have been studying their homeworld. The reports are interesting." Now Zexhai did turn. He looked down at the younger officer with the patience of someone who had heard similar reports hundreds of times before. "Define interesting." Lekhai activated his datapad. A small hologram appeared above it, showing a blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. "Their planet is called Earth. They are a young species, sir. They have only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last 50 of their years. By our standards, they are barely out of their primitive phase." "Numbers?" Zexhai asked. "Approximately 8 billion individuals on their homeworld. Perhaps 2 billion more scattered across colonies in their local system group. They have established settlements on about 30 worlds, all within a small region of space." Zexhai nodded. It was smaller than most civilizations the hegemony encountered, but size did not matter. The pattern was always the same regardless of numbers. "Military capability?" "Limited, sir. Their ships use simple fusion drives and basic energy weapons. No reality manipulation. No exotic matter. No hive mind connections. Their technology appears to be purely mechanical and digital." Lekhai paused. "Sir, they seem almost primitive compared to our recent opponents." The captain almost laughed. Primitive. How many times had he heard that word? The young officers always said it about new species. They never understood that primitive did not mean harmless. Some of the hegemony's hardest battles had been against species with simple technology, but clever minds. "What of their response to our presence?" Zexhai asked. "Our scouts report increased military activity in their space. Ships moving between worlds. Communications traffic has doubled. They appear to be organizing some kind of response." Lekhai looked up from his datapad. "The War Council believes they are preparing to send a fleet, sir. Just like all the others." Zexhai turned back to the display of dead worlds. "Yes, just like all the others. Humanity would follow the pattern. They would gather their ships. They would make their alliances. They would choose their best weapons and their finest commanders. They would send everything they had in one desperate attempt to stop the hegemony. And they would fail. Because they were following a pattern that was 3,000 years old. Because the Crithani had seen it all before. Because no matter how hard they tried or how clever they thought they were just the next name on a very long list. "Prepare the demonstration fleet," Zexhai ordered. "Standard protocol. When the humans send their armada, we will show them how pointless resistance truly is." But as he spoke the words, something nagged at the back of his mind. A small detail that seemed wrong. In all the reports of increased human activity, there was something missing. Where were the desperate calls for help? Where were the attempts to contact other species? Where were the signs of panic that always came when a new civilization realized what they were facing? The humans were preparing for war, but they were doing it quietly. Almost as if they had been expecting this moment to come. The hyperspace detection grid lit up like a festival display. Across the command center of the Crithani flagship, officers turned toward their instruments with expectation. After 3 months of waiting, the humans were finally coming. Zexhai leaned forward in his command chair, ready to see what kind of fleet Earth had managed to assemble. Subcommander Lekhai studied his readings with a confused expression. He checked his instruments twice before speaking. "Sir, I am detecting one hyperspace signature." "Just one," Zexhai frowned. "Clarify. One ship group?" "One battle squadron?" "No, sir, one ship. Single vessel emerging from hyperspace." The main display changed to show the detection grid. A single green dot appeared at the edge of Crithani sensor range. It moved steadily forward, making no attempt to hide or change course. Zexhai stared at the dot in disbelief. After 3 months of preparation, after all the increased military activity in human space, they had sent one ship. "Scan it," he ordered. Full analysis. The sensors focused on the approaching vessel. Data began flowing across the screens. The ship was small by galactic standards, perhaps 300 meters long. Its hull was made of simple metal alloys. Its engines used basic fusion technology that was centuries old by hegemony standards. There were no exotic energy signatures, no reality warping fields, no advanced defensive systems classification. Zexai asked. It appears to be a light frigate, sir, armed with kinetic weapons and simple fusion missiles. Crew complement approximately 800 beings. The humans call it UES determination. Zexai stood up from his chair. This made no sense. Every species sent their greatest fleet when facing the hegemony. They brought their most powerful ships, their most advanced weapons, their most desperate allies.
The humans had sent what appeared to be a single patrol vessel. Could it be a scout ship?
Lekhai suggested. Perhaps they are testing our defenses before sending their main fleet. The captain considered this possibility. It was logical. Many species had sent advanced forces to probe hegemony strength, but those ships usually stayed at maximum sensor range and tried to gather information without being detected. This human vessel was approaching directly, making no effort to hide. Sir, the communications officer called out. We are receiving a transmission from the human ship. Put it through. The main screen changed to show the interior of the human vessel. A woman in a dark blue uniform sat in what was obviously the command chair. Her skin was pale brown and her black hair was pulled back in a simple style. She looked calm, almost relaxed. Her dark eyes showed no fear as she stared directly into the camera. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Ship Determination, she said in accented but clear galactic standard. I am responding to your ultimatum of 3 months ago. You demanded that humanity submit to your authority or face destruction. This is our answer. Zexai activated his own communication system. Human Captain, I am Captain Zexai of the Crithani hegemony. You speak of your answer, but I see only one small ship. Where is your fleet? Where are your allies? Captain Chen smiled. It was not the desperate smile of someone trying to appear brave. It was the calm smile of someone who knew something others did not. This is our fleet, Captain Zexai. This is all we need. Laughter echoed through the Crithani command center. The junior officers could not help themselves. The idea that one primitive ship could stand against the might of the hegemony was absurd. Even Lekhai was struggling to keep his composure, but Zexai did not laugh. Something about the human captain bothered him. She was too calm, too confident. In 3,000 years of conquest, he had seen many brave commanders make their final stands. They all had the same look in their eyes, the desperate courage of someone who knew they were going to die but chose to fight anyway. This human woman did not have that look. She looked like someone who expected to win. Captain Chen, Zexai said carefully, you must understand the situation. My fleet consists of over 200 vessels. Each one is larger and more powerful than your ship. You cannot possibly believe that you can defeat us. We've studied your previous conquest, Captain. Chen replied. We know exactly what your fleet can do. We've analyzed every battle you've fought for the past 50 years. We understand your tactics, your weapons, your strategies. We know how you think and how you fight. Now Zexai was truly confused. If you have studied us so thoroughly, then you know that resistance is futile. Every species that has faced us has been defeated. Why do you persist in this foolishness? Chen's smile grew wider. Because every species that faced you made the same mistake. They tried to outfight you. They tried to build bigger ships and stronger weapons. They thought they could win through superior force or technology. We're going to try something different. The captain's words sent a chill through Zexai. He had heard similar claims before, but something about the way she said them was different. There was no desperation in her voice. No false bravado, just quiet certainty. Tactical, he called to his weapons officer. Bring Battle Group 7 to intercept the human vessel. Standard capture protocol. I want that ship intact for study. On the tactical display, 12 Crithani ships broke away from the main fleet and moved toward the Determination. Each ship was 3 times the size of the human frigate and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. It should have been overwhelming force against a single enemy. Captain Chen watched the approaching ships on her own displays. She turned to speak with someone off camera, then looked back at the communication screen. Captain Zexai, I need to ask you something. In all your battles, in all your conquests, has anyone ever told you that you're predictable? The question caught Zexai off guard. Predictable? Your Battle Group 7 is moving in Formation Delta 7. Your ships are charging their bioweapons to 60% power. Your lead vessel is preparing to fire a disabling shot at our engines in approximately 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Am I wrong? Zexhai looked at his tactical displays in shock. Everything the human captain had said was exactly correct. But how could she know? The battle group was still too far away for her simple sensors to detect weapon charges or formations. Impossible, he whispered. Not impossible, Chen said calmly. Predictable. You've used Formation Delta 7 in 87% of your engagements against single vessels. Your bioweapons always charge to 60% for capture missions. Your lead ships always target engines first to prevent escape. We know because we've been watching. We've been learning. The Battle Group 7 commander's voice crackled over the fleet communication system. Hegemony Control, we are in position to begin the capture operation. Zexhai stared at the human captain on his screen. She was still smiling. Still calm. Still confident. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he had never experienced in battle. Uncertainty. Captain Chen, he said slowly, what are you planning to do? Something that should have been done a long time ago, she replied. We're going to break the pattern. The determination suddenly accelerated toward the Battle Group 7 ships. Its weapons came online and targeting systems locked onto the Crithani vessels. But instead of firing immediately, the human ship began transmitting massive amounts of data. Technical specifications, tactical analyses, detailed breakdowns of hegemony technology and strategies. What is this? Zexhai asked, studying the data stream. It's everything they know about us, Zexhai realized with growing horror. Everything they've learned from watching our battles. They're broadcasting it across the entire system. Captain Chen's image flickered as the transmission continued. Every species you've conquered left records of their battles with you. We found those records. We studied them. We learned from them. For 50 years we've been preparing for this moment. Goodbye, Captain Zexhai. The communication cut off just as Battle Group 7 opened fire on the determination. Zexhai watched in stunned silence as the human ship began to fight back. But this was not like any battle he had ever seen before. The determination moved as if it could predict where every shot would be fired, before the Crithani ships even targeted it. Its own weapons found weak points in hegemony armor that should have been impossible to detect. Within minutes, the first Crithani ship exploded. Then another. The determination continued its impossible dance, dodging attacks that should have been unavoidable while striking back with devastating precision. Zexhai realized that everything had changed. The pattern that had held for 3,000 years was finally broken. And it had been broken by a species that had done something no other race had ever managed. They had learned to think like the hegemony. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes and 43 seconds. When it ended, 12 Crithani vessels drifted in space as expanding clouds of debris and superheated gas. The UES Determination hung motionless among the wreckage, its hull showing no signs of damage. Not a single shot had found its target. Zexhai stared at the tactical display in absolute silence. His command center was equally quiet. Every officer stood frozen at their stations, unable to process what they had just witnessed. In 3,000 years of galactic conquest, nothing like this had ever happened. Battle Group 7 had been elite units, veteran ships with crews that had fought in dozens of campaigns. They had been destroyed by a single primitive vessel that should not have been able to damage them. Tactical analysis, Zexhai finally managed to say. His voice sounded strange in his own ears, hollow and uncertain. The tactical officer, a young Crithani named Vexitai, worked frantically at his console. His hands shook as he called up the battle recordings. Sir, I have reviewed the engagement data 3 times. The results are inconsistent with known physical laws. Explain. Vexitai activated the main display. The battle began to replay in slow motion. The human ship moved as if it knew where our weapons would fire before we fired them. Watch this sequence. He highlighted a moment where the determination rolled to avoid a bioplasma burst. Our targeting computer locked onto their position. The plasma charge was fired, but they began evasive maneuvers 1.3 seconds before the weapon discharged. Zexhai studied the replay. The tactical officer was correct. The human ship had moved to avoid shots that had not yet been fired. Sensor malfunction? No, sir. I checked all systems. The recordings are accurate. Vexitai switched to another sequence. Here, watch their weapon targeting. They fired kinetic rounds at apparently empty space. But look at the trajectory analysis. The display showed the path of human projectiles. They seemed to fly randomly until Crithani ships moved directly into their paths. It was as if the humans had known exactly where each vessel would be several seconds in the future. This is impossible, Sub-Commander Lekhai whispered. No sensor system can predict movement patterns with that accuracy. There's more, sir, Vextai continued. Their weapons should not have been able to penetrate our bioarmor. Simple kinetic rounds and fusion warheads should have been absorbed or deflected, but they struck at precise points where our armor was weakest, points that are not visible to external sensors. Zexai watched the replay again. Each human shot had indeed struck at the exact locations where Crithani ship armor was thinnest, or where internal structures were most vulnerable. The weapons themselves were crude, but they had been used with surgical precision. How could they know our weak points? He asked. Before anyone could answer, the communication system activated. Captain Chen's face appeared on the main screen. She looked exactly as calm as she had before the battle. Behind her, human crew members worked quietly at their stations. There was no celebration, no excitement. They acted as if destroying 12 enemy ships was routine. Captain Zexai, Chen said politely, I hope you found that demonstration educational. How? Was all Zexai could manage to say. How did we win? The same way your people have been winning for 3,000 years. Superior intelligence. The difference is that our intelligence comes from studying our enemies instead of conquering them. Chen touched a control, and data began flowing across Zexai's screens. Technical specifications, battle analyses, detailed breakdowns of Crithani ship designs and tactical doctrines. The amount of information was staggering. For 50 years we've been collecting every piece of data we could find about the hegemony, Chen explained. Battle records from conquered species, sensor readings from destroyed ships, tactical analyses from fallen civilizations. We gathered it all, studied it all, learned from it all. The Veltar kept excellent records of your weapon systems before they fell. The Osari hive mind documented your formation patterns in extraordinary detail. The Zenith Federation analyzed your bioarmor composition down to the molecular level. Every species you conquered left us pieces of the puzzle. Zexai felt something cold spreading through his chest. You were not preparing to fight us. You were preparing to become us. Better than you, Chen corrected. We learned your strengths and your weaknesses. We know how you think because we studied every decision you've made in battle for the past 3,000 years. We know what you'll do before you do it because you follow the same patterns over and over again. The human captain gestured to someone off-screen. Our tactical AI has processed 847,000 individual hegemony engagements. It has identified 23,000 unique patterns in your behavior. Ship movements, weapon targeting, formation changes, retreat protocols. Everything you do follows predictable patterns based on previous actions. That's impossible, Lekhai protested. Combat is fluid. Battles change constantly. No one can predict everything. Chen's expression grew serious. You're wrong, Sub-Commander. You can predict everything if you have enough data and the patience to analyze it properly. Your people have been fighting the same way for millennia. You've become so confident in your superiority that you've stopped adapting, stopped growing, stopped learning. She paused to let that sink in. Every species you conquered tried to match your strength. They built bigger ships, developed new weapons, created exotic technologies. They all failed because they were trying to beat you at your own game. We decided to change the game entirely. Zexai stared at the human captain with growing understanding and horror. You turned our own methods against us, exactly. The hegemony wins because you study your enemies and exploit their weaknesses. We studied you and exploited yours. The only difference is that we did it better. The tactical display updated to show the rest of the Crithani fleet. Nearly 200 ships in perfect formation exactly as they had been for the past 3 months. Unchanged. Predictable. You want to know how we knew your ships would be in formation Delta 7? Chen asked. Because you've used that formation against single vessels 847 times in the past 50 years. You want to know how we targeted your weak points? Because 17 different species documented those same vulnerabilities before you destroyed them. She leaned forward in her chair. You want to know how we avoided your weapons? Because we've seen you use them thousands of times. Every shot you fired was exactly where our computers predicted it would be. Every maneuver you made was standard hegemony doctrine from your tactical manual. The command center fell silent again. Zexai could hear his own breathing in the stillness. Everything Chen said was true. The hegemony had been using the same strategies for centuries because they worked. Why change something that brought victory after victory? But now those victories had become weaknesses. Every successful battle had taught their enemies how to defeat them. Every conquest had provided more data for someone patient enough to collect it all. What happens now? HFY asked quietly. Now you have a choice, Chen replied. You can continue following your patterns, in which case we will continue defeating you. Or you can do something your people haven't done in 3,000 years. Which is, learn something new. Chen's image flickered as she prepared to end the transmission. We're sending you the complete tactical analysis of this engagement. Study it. Share it with your fleet commanders. Try to understand what just happened here, because this is only the beginning. The communication ended, leaving HFY alone with his shocked officers and the impossible truth. The hegemony had always won because they were smarter than their enemies. But now they faced an enemy that had learned to be smarter than them. The age of predictable conquest was over. The age of adaptation had begun, and the Crithani were no longer the students. They had become the lesson. Admiral Krexthul arrived with the Grand Fleet 3 days after the destruction of Battle Group 7. 2,000 ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their biomechanical hulls gleaming with predatory grace. This was the largest force the hegemony had assembled in over 2 centuries. It should have been enough to crush any resistance. The UES determination waited for them. Krexthul stood in the command center of his flagship, studying the lone human vessel on his tactical display. 3 days earlier, he had been confident that Captain HFY was exaggerating the threat. No single ship could pose a real danger to the hegemony, regardless of how it had defeated one small battle group. But now, after reviewing the battle data, the Admiral was no longer certain of anything. Communications, he ordered. Open a channel to the human vessel. Captain Chen appeared on the main screen, looking as calm as ever. Behind her, the bridge of the determination seemed peaceful and quiet. There was no sign of stress or preparation for the battle that was about to begin. Admiral Krexthul, Chen said before he could speak. We've been expecting you. Fleet composition is exactly as our models predicted. 2,000 ships in standard battle formation 9. Flagship at the center, heavy assault vessels in the forward positions, support ships in the rear. Very traditional. Krexthul felt a chill run through his body. She was correct about everything, down to the specific formation designation. How could the humans know their fleet arrangement so precisely? Captain Chen, he said carefully, you face the might of the entire hegemony Grand Fleet. Surely you understand that continued resistance is pointless. Actually, Admiral, we think this is the perfect time to demonstrate something important. Chen touched a control, and data began flowing across Krexthul's screens. We've been analyzing your fleet composition for the past 72 hours. Our computers have identified optimal engagement patterns for every ship class you've brought. The tactical display updated to show detailed analyses of individual hegemony vessels. Weapon loadouts, armor configurations, crew complements, engine specifications, everything was laid out with impossible accuracy. How do you know this information? Krexthul demanded. The same way we knew everything else. We studied the records left by your previous enemies. The Veltar documented your heavy cruiser designs in extraordinary detail. The Osiri analyzed your command ship specifications. The Zenith Federation mapped your support vessel vulnerabilities. Every species you conquered gave us more pieces of the puzzle. Chen paused to let this sink in. But we didn't stop with old data. For the past 3 days, our passive sensors have been scanning your fleet continuously. We know which ships have damaged armor from previous battles. We know which vessels are operating with reduced crew complements. We know which commanders prefer aggressive tactics and which ones are more cautious. Krexthul looked at his own tactical officers in shock. Is this possible? His senior analyst, a veteran named Texvar, nodded grimly. Sir, their sensor capabilities appear far more advanced than we initially assessed. But more importantly, they seem to have comprehensive files on our operational procedures. Files that go back centuries. Chen continued from the screen. We know that Admiral Krexthul prefers to divide large fleets into 3 attack waves. We know that hegemony doctrine calls for overwhelming force concentration at the enemy's weakest point. We know that your people will sacrifice support vessels to protect command ships. The Admiral felt his confidence cracking. Everything the human captain said was accurate. These were indeed his preferred tactics, refined through decades of successful campaigns. But how could an enemy knowing his preferences matter? Superior numbers and firepower should overcome any tactical advantage. Captain Chen, he said, even if you know our methods, you still face impossible odds. Your single ship cannot defeat 2,000 vessels, regardless of how much you have studied us. You're thinking like a hegemony commander, Chen replied. You're assuming this is about firepower and numbers. It's not. This is about information and precision. She gestured to someone off-screen. Our tactical AI has been running engagement simulations for the past 3 days. It has analyzed 47,000 possible scenarios based on your current fleet composition and deployment. In 98.3% of those scenarios, we achieve complete victory. Impossible. Not impossible. Inevitable. Because while you've been preparing to fight us, we've been preparing to teach you. The determination suddenly powered up its engines and accelerated toward the Grand Fleet. But instead of heading for the main formation, it aimed for a seemingly random point in empty space. Krexthol watched in confusion as the human ship moved to a position that gave it no tactical advantage. All ships, he ordered, converge on the human vessel. Standard attack pattern. The Grand Fleet began to move, 2,000 ships turning toward the determination with predatory grace. But as they repositioned, something unexpected happened. The fleet's formation began to break down. Ships that should have maintained their assigned positions found themselves blocking each other's fields of fire. Support vessels that needed protection from the main battle line discovered they were exposed and vulnerable. What's happening? Krexthol demanded. Sir, Texvar reported with growing alarm. The human ship positioned itself at the exact point where our standard convergence pattern creates tactical conflicts. If we maintain formation, we can't achieve proper fire coordination. If we break formation, we lose our defensive integrity. Chen's voice came over the communication system. Standard attack pattern. 12 has a critical flaw, Admiral. When you converge on a target at coordinates that are exactly 23.7 degrees off your fleet's central axis, your ships interfere with each other. The Veltar discovered this weakness 50 years ago, but they never got a chance to exploit it before you destroyed them. Krexthol stared at his tactical display in growing horror. The human captain was correct. He could see the problem now that she had pointed it out. His own formation was becoming a liability. Adjust formation, he ordered. Execute pattern 7. But as his fleet began to reposition again, the determination moved to a new location. Once again, the human ship placed itself at exactly the point where the new formation would be most disadvantaged. Pattern 7 leaves your command ships exposed to long-range fire when the fleet is spread across more than 50,000 kilometers, Chen explained helpfully. The Asari documented this vulnerability in their final battle reports. They managed to destroy 3 hegemony flagships before you adapted your tactics. For the next hour, the same scenario repeated itself over and over. Every formation Krexthol tried had some critical weakness that the humans seemed to know about in advance. Every tactical adjustment was countered before it could be effective. The Grand Fleet found itself constantly repositioning but never able to achieve a stable attack posture. Worse, the determination began picking off isolated ships. Whenever a vessel became separated from the main fleet during formation changes, the human ship was there to attack it. Quick, precise strikes that targeted exactly the right weaknesses at exactly the right moments. One by one, hegemony ships began to disappear. How many have we lost? Krexthol asked after the 10th ship was destroyed. 47 vessels, sir, Texavar reported. All support ships and light cruisers. They're avoiding direct engagement with our heavy units. Because they don't need to destroy our heavy units, the Admiral realized with sickening clarity. They're stripping away our support structure, making our main fleet less effective. It was a classic hegemony tactic, one that Krexthol had used many times himself. Identify the enemy's weaknesses, exploit them systematically, never engage in battles you might lose. The humans had learned this strategy by watching the hegemony use it for centuries. Sir, the communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the human ship. Chen's face appeared on the screen again. This time she looked almost sympathetic. Admiral, you've been trying the same tactics for 3 hours. Every formation in your tactical manual has exploitable weaknesses. Every attack pattern has been used so many times that we can predict your next move before you make it. What do you want? Krexthol asked wearily. We want you to understand something that the hegemony has forgotten, Chen replied. Knowledge is more powerful than strength. Intelligence is more valuable than numbers. The ability to learn and adapt is worth more than all the weapons in the galaxy. She paused. Your people have been so successful for so long that you've stopped growing. You've become predictable, and predictable enemies can always be defeated by someone patient enough to study them. The Admiral looked around his command center at the faces of his officers. For the first time in 3,000 years, the hegemony was learning what it felt like to be outmatched, not by superior firepower, but by superior thinking. The age of conquest through force is ending, Chen continued. The age of victory through understanding has begun. You can either learn to adapt, or you can continue to follow patterns that no longer work. Krexthul realized that everything had changed. The galaxy would never be the same again, and the hegemony was no longer its master. 6 months after the Battle of Hegemony's end, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the newly constructed council chamber on Zenith Station. The massive room had been built from the wreckage of both human and Chthoni ships, a symbol of cooperation rising from the ashes of conflict. Representatives from 47 different species filled the circular seating arrangement, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity that had not been seen in 3,000 years. Chen wore a simple dark blue uniform, the same one she had worn as captain of the Determination. The ship itself was docked outside the station, no longer a weapon of war but a reminder of how everything had changed. She looked out at the assembled representatives and saw hope in faces that had known only fear for millennia. 3,000 years ago, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. The galaxy learned to follow a pattern. The strong conquered the weak. The advanced destroyed the primitive. The many overwhelmed the few. For countless generations, species rose and fell according to this same simple rule. She touched a control on her podium, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber. Images of dead worlds, destroyed civilizations, and broken fleets filled the air above the representatives. The Veltar crystals dimmed to darkness. The Osari colonies went silent. The Zenith Federation's reality-warping ships became space dust. Every species that faced the hegemony tried to win through force, Chen continued. They built larger fleets, developed stronger weapons, created more advanced technologies. They all believed that the answer to superior power was more power. They were all wrong. The displays changed to show battle analyses, tactical breakdowns, and strategic assessments. Thousands of engagements spread across centuries, all following the same predictable patterns. Attack, defend, retreat, fall. The same story told over and over again. Humanity chose a different path, Chen said. When we first detected hegemony scout ships in our space, we did what humans have always done when faced with a problem we couldn't solve through strength. We studied it. We learned from it. We adapted to it. A new set of images appeared, showing human research facilities, analysis centers, and data collection networks. Massive computer systems processing information from thousands of sources. Teams of scientists, historians, and tactical analysts working for decades to understand their enemy. We spent 50 years collecting every piece of information we could find about the hegemony, Chen explained. Battle records, sensor data, survivor testimonies, wreckage analysis. Every species that fell left us clues about how to succeed where they had failed. One of the representatives, a crystalline being who had survived the fall of the Veltar, spoke in a voice like chiming bells. You learned from our deaths. We learned from your sacrifices, Chen corrected gently. Every battle you fought, every stand you made, every piece of data you recorded, became part of the foundation for ultimate victory. Your resistance was not meaningless. It was essential. The holographic displays showed the gradual accumulation of knowledge over time, puzzle pieces fitting together to form a complete picture of hegemony capabilities, tactics, and weaknesses, the vast intelligence network that humanity had built to understand their enemy. But information alone was not enough, Chen continued. We also had to learn how to think differently. The hegemony succeeded because they studied their enemies and exploited weaknesses. We succeeded because we studied the hegemony and exploited their predictability. Admiral Krexthul, who now sat in the chamber as a representative of the reformed Chthoni government, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The defeat of the Grand Fleet had shattered more than just ships. It had broken 3 millennia of certainty, and forced his people to confront the reality that they were no longer the galaxy's dominant species. Admiral Krexthul, Chen said, addressing him directly, would you like to explain to the Council what your people have learned from this experience? The Crithani admiral stood slowly, his chitinous frame casting long shadows in the chamber's light. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the arrogance that had once defined his species. "We learned that strength without wisdom is weakness," he said quietly. "We learned that victory without growth is defeat. We learned that conquest without understanding is failure." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "For 3,000 years, the hegemony believed we were the teachers of the galaxy. We thought we were showing other species how to properly organize themselves under our rule. We never realized that we were actually students, and our lessons were being recorded by someone patient enough to wait for the final examination." Chen nodded approvingly. "The hegemony taught the galaxy many things. You taught us about biomechanical technology, stellar engineering, and advanced sensor systems. You also taught us about the dangers of complacency, the weakness of predictability, and the importance of continuous learning." The displays changed again, this time showing construction projects throughout the galaxy. Shipyards where human and alien technologies were being combined. Research facilities where former enemies worked together on new discoveries. Communication networks that connected worlds that had been isolated for centuries. "Today we begin a new pattern," Chen announced. "Not conquest but cooperation. Not domination but development. Not the rule of the strong over the weak, but the partnership of all species working toward common goals." A representative from the Osiri Collective, one of the few surviving nodes of their once vast hive mind, pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that translated as curiosity. "How do we know this pattern will not simply repeat the old mistakes? How do we prevent humanity from becoming the next hegemony?" It was a fair question, one that had been debated extensively during the formation of the new council. Chen had anticipated it. "Because we've designed the system to prevent it," she replied. "The Galactic Liberation Council operates on principles of shared knowledge and distributed power. No single species can dominate because every species contributes something unique and valuable." She gestured to the mixed crews visible through the chamber's windows, humans and aliens working side by side on the station's operations. "Our strength comes from diversity, not uniformity. Our security comes from cooperation, not conquest. Our future comes from learning together, not fighting alone." The representative from the Machine Imperium, a sophisticated AI that had uploaded the consciousness of its creators, processed this information with electronic precision. Query: "What safeguards exist to ensure this cooperation continues beyond the current generation?" "Education," Chen answered simply. "Every species in the Council maintains complete historical records of the hegemony period. Every school teaches children about the dangers of believing that one group is superior to all others. Every military academy studies the battles not to learn how to conquer, but to learn how to prevent conquest." She touched her controls again, and the displays showed classrooms throughout the galaxy. Human children learning Veltar crystal harmonics, young Crithani studying Osari collective decision-making, Zenith Federation survivors teaching reality manipulation to eager students from dozens of worlds. "Knowledge belongs to everyone," Chen declared. "Technology belongs to everyone. The mistakes of the past belong to everyone, so that the successes of the future can belong to everyone as well." The council session continued for hours, with representatives from each member species contributing their own perspectives and experiences. Treaties were signed, trade agreements were negotiated, and research partnerships were established. The galaxy was being rebuilt, not under the rule of a single dominant power, but through the combined efforts of all its inhabitants. As the session finally ended, Chen found herself standing alone in the chamber, looking out at the stars through the massive viewing windows. The Determination floated nearby, its hull reflecting the light of nearby suns. The ship that had ended an age of darkness now served as a reminder that knowledge and understanding could triumph over force and fear. Admiral Krexthul approached her slowly, his movements careful and respectful. "Ambassador Chen, I have a question that has troubled me since our first encounter." "Yes, Admiral? How did your species learn to think so far ahead? How did you have the patience to study us for 50 years without attacking? Most species would have rushed into battle long before they were truly prepared." Chen smiled, the same calm smile she had worn during their first communication. "Because we learned from history, Admiral. We studied not just your victories, but your defeats. We examined not just how you succeeded, but how others failed." She turned to face him directly. "Every species that fought you made the same mistake. They reacted with fear instead of planning with wisdom. They let emotion drive their decisions instead of letting knowledge guide their actions. We decided to do something different. And that was, we decided to be patient, to learn, to grow, to become something better than what we were when we started. Chen looked back out at the stars. That's what makes this new pattern different from the old one. We're not trying to prove we're stronger than everyone else. We're trying to help everyone become stronger together. The ambassador turned away from the window and began walking toward the exit.